So today we are leaning into our last sermon on the book of James, and you're probably going, phew, right? Obviously you haven't heard this book read during Advent, right? You don't go into Advent going, don't slander! Jesus is coming. But it's a good one for us to begin our fall with and our sermon series where we are pairing it with The Anxious Generation, a book that came out to talk about the anxiety and the difficulties of childhood and family life in today's world. So for me, what this passage made me think about is the fact that I had two very different grandmothers. I had one grandmother that was the bedrock of my childhood, my mother's mother. When her and Grandpa moved away, we spent every summer with them. A lot of my shenanigans and tales from Maine to Florida were during that time. Yes, they did drive a station wagon with side panels, which I felt like was just like station wagon with like a belt, right? Like, woo, those fancy side panels. Yes, we did drive through Manhattan in it, and yes, it was very scary. I think by the time my grandpa got there, like they lived in North Carolina, and they would meet us from Maine to Florida, all those different places, and we'd drive back to their place after having a little bit of travel time. So I got to see Cape Canaveral, which was cool, and we did go through Manhattan, but I don't remember stopping. I really remember him going like, oh, Statue of Liberty, and we're just like, trying to get through all the traffic, but good people, they were good people. She was Dorothy. She was kind. She was an amazing cook. She basically held our family together during holidays. Her house was immaculate. She got her hair done each week, that blow dry, that curler under the thing. Dorothy's nodding, the family, like teasing it, right? So it looks like a football helmet, right? Every week. She always wore lipstick and was always very well dressed. She always gave the best gifts. She was very thoughtful. And she loved me. I'm absolutely certain of it. Her loving kindness is what I miss the most about her passing in the late 1990s. One grandmother, as you can imagine, was maybe not so much the bedrock of my childhood, and that was my dad's mom. She wasn't kind. She was kind of sharp and a little bit mean. She made remarks about people's appearances that were not kind, including my mother's. My mother was older than my dad, and at every opportunity, she would say, if you did this, you'd look 10 years younger. She would comment on my weight. She'd comment on everything that she thought she had an opinion for. She was not a great parent. She never kept very many friends. We would also visit her and my grandfather, who was a World War II veteran, and his stories were harrowing. He liberated Auschwitz, and my great uncle wrote his tale down. So I know that they'd had a hard life. But I think the thing I remember most about her is that she really didn't have a kind word for anyone. And she complained about everything. Do you know people like that? Yeah. Later I learned out in therapy, I paid a lot of money to say this phrase. She was doing the best she could as a narcissistic hypochondriac. But as a kid, I think what was most confusing to me is our family, personally, mom, dad, and me, went to church faithfully every Sunday. But one set of grandparents also went to church faithfully and another didn't. Can you imagine which one was which? Can you imagine? Any guesses? Not the nice one. My mean, cranky, gossipy grandmother was our aggressively evangelical grandparent. Our family went to a small Episcopal church, very, very calm, like you all like it. Calm, liturgy, women up front. Social justice was talked about. Music was traditional. Not a lot of talk about getting saved or asking people to come up and cry and pray their feelings out and get saved and laid hands on, right? Nothing about that. I sang in the choir at my church. My dad was head of what they call the council. In the Episcopal church, he's called the warden. I know. Very interesting. I speak Episcopal. My mother was in charge of the paraments, so she was the one that would iron and wash and do all the things. And we loved our priest. Father Bill was amazing, the kindest, most loving person. My other grandmother's church in Arizona was one of those big mega churches with loud music and loud altar calls every Sunday. And for me, that was culture shock. But I have to say, I often liked the messages of the pastors. I say pastors because she never stayed with one church for very long. Can you imagine it? Yeah, something was always wrong, it was always their fault, and we always went to another church. So we attended several churches with her. I didn't particularly like the feel of the churches, but again, the messages were often a nice change from the shorter, less exuberant messages of my childhood. I remember one such altar call moment, and I really did feel, so imagine it, I'm from this 100-person little Episcopal church growing up. My grandparents on one side, that they were kind, generous, loving, they'd come occasionally, like Christmas, Easter, you know. And then I'd go to this other church in Arizona that was big and huge. I mean, like, I'd never seen a church this big. I think we were in the upper loft of the church. Like, it felt like a stadium. Were we watching the Dodgers? Like, I wasn't sure. But I really liked the message. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, we're supposed to come forward and share this message and understand this message of Jesus. I accept this. And I remember thinking in my head, you're supposed to walk down. Like, they can't mean literally. So in my head, I remember, like, imagining myself walking down, meeting Jesus, and then I open my eyes and people are actually moving, and I'm like, what is happening? We don't move during, right? No one gets out of their pews during worship, right? Like, that was just a very interesting thing. But I remember looking over at her, and she's the one that really stopped me, that I want to be like her. Did this represent her, right? And so it made me think today of the James reading. I don't mean to speak ill of someone who can't speak for herself today, but it is a lesson for us all to learn. What does it mean to be a witness in the world, especially when kids are involved and they're so impressionable? What we say and what we do impacts what they think about our faith. Because her witness really did keep me from calling myself a Christian for years. It wouldn't be until winter camp in high school that I would truly have what I called an encounter with Jesus that changed my life. Now, I don't blame her for everything. I'm an adult, I make choices. But I think the thing to take away and that I always remember about this is our witness matters. Our witness matters. It's interesting that sometimes the thing that many Christians are known for, which is being judgmental, is the thing that Jesus and the authors of the New Testament speak the most about. Not doing, right? How we speak matters. It either connects us to one another or disconnects us. In today's passage, we could go a million different directions with it, but I wanted to stick at the beginning the idea of slander. So the word for slander is always sometimes transliterated as disparage or to talk down. And the word in Greek is katalaleo. You know I'd go there. Say it with me. Katalaleo. Okay. It's derived from two words. The second half being the biggest word. The Greek verb we would translate as laleo. I'm sure that's not how they said it in Greek, but go with me. There also was another word for speaking. It's a different word. It means to say or to tell, with a stronger emphasis on the actual message or the topic. But that's not the word that James uses in this passage. James uses the verb that means to speak or convey with the emphasis on information being a means of connecting with one another. So just so you know, laleo is the verb of the root word logos. And where have we heard logos before? The first chapter of Gospel of John says Jesus is the what? The word, the logos, the experience, the connection of God. Jesus is. Not just in the act of communicating words, but in the meaning and connection that words provide. Because you know, language is meant to connect. We talk to share ourselves with others, but language, as we know, can also break down when we don't speak well of one another. So leo means words that are communicated for connection. And its beginning is kata. Kata means down or against. So it literally means communicating against, is what James is talking about. Don't communicate against people. When you communicate against people in community, you're doing it to God. But that full meaning is not merely to say something bad about someone, but rather to engage in and entertain a full-fledged conversation that explores people's proposed vices. With this kind of talk, it's often not the actual information that's shared, whether it's true or not, but rather the generating and cultivating of a poisonous or difficult energy that makes it impossible for anybody to connect properly. So if you find yourself in this place or in your workplace or in your family place talking more about somebody than to somebody, you are probably engaging in katalaleo. Although the word sounds great, right? Katalaleo! No. But we know it can be difficult. And worse, whatever you do in community, James says you do to God. The judgment. About 20 years ago, when I was looking this up, in 2004, and then I just sat there and thought, was 2004 20 years ago? Was it? Oh my God. A movie came out, an independent film came out called Saved. And you have to say it like that because it has an explanation. Did anyone see that? Saved. Right? Starred Macaulay Culkin, Mandy Moore, Jenna Malone. They were Christian teenagers in a Christian high school. And when one of them was struggling and confides in the other, they have this struggle. It's all the tropes of Christianity, but the scene that I found most compelling in that movie, because these are all teenagers, is she shares a struggle she's having, and then later she walks into her friend that she shared the private struggle with, and they're in a prayer group at someone's house, and what are they doing? Talking about her struggle. Can you pray for me? Can you pray for my friend who's pregnant, out of wedlock, or whatever it was, right? So prayer, in that moment, is basically gossip. Now, not always, but sometimes it can be. And I think sometimes we forget that it's really, really easy to bond in ways that are, like if you've ever had a boss that's bad, you tend to, as an employee, bond with one another because what's the shenanigan guy doing? What's that gal doing over there? We bond in those ways. And I think it's okay to have moments where you share frustration, right? That's okay. But if you continue to bond with people in that way, you are not connecting, you are disconnecting, and that is called katalaleo. And so, how adults treat kids and families and kids within this church community not only impacts their spiritual growth, but it also affects, like my grandmother's behavior did, what we think about God in this setting. And as we've gone in this book, The Anxious Generation, we have seen and understood that for each generation, for yours, mine, every generation, parenting has its own challenges, and families have their own unique struggles. I'm glad we're not outside, right? And so I think sometimes every generation believes that generations that come after them are deficient in some way. It's human nature to look back on your own time. You were a perfect parent. Why are these kids running around? Right? Come on, right? Yeah. It's why I never engage in generational shaming. I don't say, oh, those millennials, those Gen Zers, those Gen Xers, because I'm a Gen Xer. So step off. We were outside drinking out of the hose when I was a kid. I didn't get to come home until it was dinner time and the lights were out, right? The lights came on in the neighborhood and that's when you came home. I was feral, right? Just gonna be honest. Any Gen Xers here? We were feral, right? So I wonder if in all of this, the greatest gift our church or any church can give to this anxious generation is grace, empathy, and compassion. As we finish up the book discussions around the book, Jonathan has some wise words for how to be better aligned in community. He says no smartphones before high school. That's tough. No social media before age 16. I actually think that one's probably a good idea. Phone-free schools, which is already being implemented some places. And lastly, advocating for more play-based childhood with less screen time and more autonomy. like my childhood. And I turned out perfect, right? Some of these seem good, but as a parent, I can imagine the fear of not being able to get a hold of your kid during school when the thing I don't need to say out loud is happening a lot, right? Happens every week. It's a scary world out there. So maybe the best gift that we can give our families with kids in this place is to be a place that is present without judgment, without gossip, and without meanness, right? That we create a space where we have good assumptions about one another. Is it distracting when a baby fusses or cries in church? Sure it is. But it's also the best noise. It's the best noise. When we no longer hear that noise in church, we should be a little concerned. So how can we create space so parents of this generation feel like the adults here, fellow parents, or chosen grandparents, are on their side in a world full of vast opinions about parenting? If you follow TikTok, and I don't advise you do, but it's fun. Cat videos are fun. Don't let them tell you otherwise. But sometimes it can be a lot to be a parent. There's judgment on how you should do everything, right? From trad wives who are stay-at-home to working people and everyone in between, right? But what if we, instead of leaning into kids these days or parents these days, what if we could be that negative-free zone? So that mistakes can be made and kids can be free to roam. So when we notice something we don't understand, we can be curious and kind rather than judgmental. One of the things we talked about on Monday night was this idea of venting, right? So who vents? Like, so you're frustrated and you find your person and you just go blah, right? Is that a verbal venting? Yeah, that's pretty good, huh? Usually it has words, but anyway. Venting is usually seen as a healthy coping mechanism, and it is a healthy coping mechanism. But recent research suggests that it actually may be harmful to your mental health. Because while venting can make you feel better initially, it's like when you have an emotional moment and I eat a whole dozen donuts. I know, but I don't. But if you do that, it's not good in the long term, is it? Yeah, it's not good in the long term. And what does it look like for us to have our feelings and emotions, which we should never not have them, but think about resolving issues rather than just explaining issues? Does that make sense? Resolving issues rather than just explaining or getting mad at issues. And when we show this example to our kids, again, their brains are a bit mushy. They're not here, so I can say that, right? Their brains are a bit mushy. And so if we catastrophize and think negatively and vent and get angry about every little thing, it imprints on them. And it's not that kids will run wild in this space. It's that kids are unleashed to roam with freedom. And we can correct the behavior we see. And we do so with love and kindness, right? If a kid is playing with something they're not supposed to play, we redirect them, right? And so I wonder if this place can be a place where families thrive amidst the chaos of the world, where each one of us come here hoping to receive and give lots of high fives, hear lots of woo-hoos, right? In a world that struggles and oftentimes feels so chaotic and negative, what would it look like for us to be a community of high fives? That's what we were known for. Man, when you come in here, you just feel so good because God is here and God is present and their words match their actions, and I feel like I'm lifted up when I'm here. What can we do to reimagine this space and ourselves for a new generation of families? Can we be a place where we speak well of one another? If we don't like something, we go to that person and talk to them directly. Can we be a place where we don't diminish the struggles of families that step through our doors because in our generation, we did this? Maybe this can be a place where we can be generous and kind and give high fives, not like my grandmother. You see, some Christians talk a lot about Jesus or who they think Jesus is, but what I think the world needs now is those who say it and those who live it. A place where we share the love of Jesus, and anyone visiting would look around and say, I can believe that message here. What if we did that with intention, knowing that each moment is fleeting? I think that's why slander and judgment in this passage is paired with go ahead and make plans. And I feel like that was really funny for today. Go ahead and make plans to be outdoor service. I feel like 4 months ago, God was like, yeah, You guys are going to have 4 outdoor services. Good luck, right? Go ahead and make plans. But each moment is fleeting. Plans are fine. But in each moment, don't think about that plan you're making and that boast you're making. Think about this moment right now. What if we did with intention? Again, knowing that each moment is fleeting. We get this one precious, wild, wonderful life. We get this one precious, wild, wonderful hour and such on a Sunday morning to see each other. And what if we utilized it to high five, to lift up, to give goodness and grace? What if we did it in such a way that our actions matched our words and that we lifted people up with a holy hello and a holy 5-5? What if our one wild and precious Sunday was spent giving glory to God with all we said and all we did? I don't think we have to imagine it. I think we live it and we can continue to live it. So as we continue to move together in worship, I want you to think about what it means to be a place where Jesus isn't just spoken but lived fully. And the love of Jesus is seen in everything we say and do. May you spend your one wild and precious Sunday morning when you are here feeling lifted up by God. And may you lift others up as well. Amen.